Welcome to Dark Seduction Stories, where dangerous love, powerful obsessions, and romance that changes everything. Drop your location in the comments, and let's dive into tonight's tale. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under Iris Moreau's apartment door like a secret or a threat. Black cardstock, heavy as sin, with silver lettering that caught the hallway light. No return address, no explanation. Just a date, a time, and an address in Tribeca she didn't recognize. She shouldn't have picked it up. She had 3 rejected articles sitting in her drafts folder, a brother who hadn't answered her calls in 4 days, and a refrigerator containing nothing but expired yogurt and half a bottle of white wine. The last thing she needed was another pretentious pop-up dinner trying to reinvent the wheel with foam and tweezers. But she picked it up anyway, because that's what food critics do. Even failed ones. Even ones who haven't been able to taste anything in 8 months. The accident had been minor, relatively speaking. A car running a red light in the rain, her Vespa sliding across wet asphalt, her helmet cracking against the pavement. She'd walked away with a concussion, a fractured wrist, and a jeusia, the medical term for what the doctors called temporary taste loss. Temporary. That's what they'd promised. 8 months ago. Iris turned the invitation over in her hands, studying it in the amber light of her kitchen. The paper felt expensive, the kind of expensive that suggested the sender had money to burn. The kind of money that might pay well for a review, if she could convince them she was still relevant. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, finally. "I'm fine, stop worrying," his text read. Stayed at Jake's place, lost track of time. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that her 26-year-old brother was actually at his friend's apartment, playing video games and eating pizza, not chasing the high that had already cost him 2 jobs and their mother's trust fund. "Come by tomorrow," she typed back. "I'll make dinner." A lie, of course. She couldn't make dinner anymore. Everything she cooked tasted like absolutely nothing, like chewing cardboard, like ashes in her mouth. She'd order Thai food and pretend she'd made it herself, and Marcus would pretend to believe her. And they'd both sit there in her apartment, pretending their lives hadn't fallen completely apart. The invitation stared up at her from the counter. Friday night, 9 p.m. "Come hungry," it said at the bottom, in smaller script. Come alone. She should throw it away. She should focus on the articles she could actually write. Restaurant reviews based on texture and presentation. Interviews with chefs about technique rather than flavor. She should accept that her career as a serious food critic was over, that she was now just a writer who happened to cover food, not someone who understood it in her bones. Instead, she texted the number printed in tiny letters at the bottom of the card. Iris Moreau, confirming for Friday. The response came immediately, as if someone had been waiting. "We know who you are. Arrive at 9 exactly. Ring the brass bell. Tell no one." A shiver ran down her spine. Equal parts dread and something else. Anticipation, maybe. Or desperation. She hadn't felt anything in so long. Friday came wrapped in October rain, the kind that turned Manhattan into a watercolor painting of smeared lights and wet pavement. Iris dressed carefully. A black silk blouse, tailored pants, the Louboutins she'd bought back when magazine assignments paid well. She pulled her dark hair into a low bun, applied lipstick she couldn't taste, perfume she couldn't smell. The address led her to a building she'd passed 100 times without noticing. A narrow townhouse squeezed between a gallery and a boutique hotel. No sign. No lights in the windows. Just a brass bell beside a black door polished to a mirror shine. She checked her phone. 8:58. At exactly 9 o'clock, she rang the bell. The door opened immediately, as if someone had been standing on the other side, waiting. A woman in her 60s, elegant in a severe black dress, looked Iris up and down with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent a lifetime judging whether people belonged. "Ms. Moreau," the woman said. Not a question. "We've been expecting you. This way, please." The interior was nothing like Iris expected. No exposed brick, no Edison bulbs, none of the industrial chic aesthetic that every underground supper club in New York seemed legally required to adopt. Instead, she found herself in what looked like an old Parisian apartment. Herringbone floors, crown molding, walls covered in dark green silk. Candlelight flickered from sconces, making shadows dance across oil paintings in gilded frames. The woman led her down a hallway lined with closed doors, each one numbered with small brass plates. Iris heard murmured conversation behind one, the clink of silverware behind another. Private dining rooms, she realized. Each guest, or couple, dining alone. "Room 7, the woman said, stopping before a door at the end of the hall. "The chef will join you shortly. In the meantime, please make yourself comfortable." Before Iris could ask any questions, the woman opened the door and gestured her inside, then disappeared back down the hallway with footsteps that made no sound. The room was small, intimate. A table for two set with white linens, crystal glasses, and silverware that looked like it belonged in a museum. A single window overlooked a private garden, though the rain made it impossible to see much beyond the glass. More candles, more shadows. No menu. Iris sat down, her journalist instincts kicking in. She pulled out her phone to take notes, then realized there was no signal. Not just weak, completely dead, as if the building itself was blocking transmission. "We prefer our guests to be fully present," a voice said from the doorway. Iris looked up, and her breath caught. The man standing in the threshold was not what she expected. Tall, lean, with dark hair that fell just past his collar, and eyes so pale they were, almost silver in the candlelight. He wore chef's whites, but they looked nothing like the stained, practical uniforms she'd seen in 1,000 restaurant kitchens. These were tailored, pristine, almost ceremonial. "Iris Moreau," he said, moving into the room with a predator's grace. "The critic who can't taste." How deliciously ironic. She stiffened. "I don't know what you're—" "Please," he interrupted, settling into the chair across from her. "I make it my business to know things about my guests. You had an accident 8 months ago. Traumatic addusia. The doctors say it's psychological now, not physical. Your brain protecting you from something, or punishing you, depending on how you look at it." Iris felt her cheeks flush. "Who the hell are you?" "Damien Cross," he said, extending a hand she didn't take. "And I'm going to make you taste again." She laughed, bitter and sharp. "That's quite a promise. Are you a chef or a faith healer?" "Both, perhaps," he said, smiling in a way that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Or neither. Does it matter if I'm right?" He stood and moved to a small sideboard she hadn't noticed, where covered dishes waited. When he lifted the first silver dome, steam rose in delicate spirals. "This is amuse-bouche," he said, placing a small white plate before her. On it sat a single oyster, barely kissed with heat, topped with something that looked like caviar, but gleamed wrong in the candlelight. Too dark, too lustrous. "I appreciate the gesture," Iris said, "but I should tell you—" "Eat it," Damien said. Not a request. Something in his voice made her obey. She picked up the oyster shell, tilted it to her lips, and let the contents slide into her mouth. For a moment, nothing. The familiar emptiness, the void where flavor should have been. She prepared to smile politely, to thank him for trying, to make her excuses and leave. Then it hit her. Salt, ocean, the mineral brightness of the sea. But underneath, something else, something rich and dark and almost obscene, like blood and earth and the space between sleeping and waking. It flooded her senses, overwhelming, almost violent in its intensity. She gasped, tears springing to her eyes. "You can taste it," Damien said softly. Not a question, a statement of fact. Iris couldn't speak. She could only nod, her hands trembling as she set down the shell. 8 months. 8 months of nothing, and now this. This explosion of sensation that made her want to weep and laugh and demand more all at once. "How?" she managed. Damien smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. They glittered in the candlelight, predatory and pleased. "That's my secret," he said. "The first of many you'll learn if you keep coming back." He placed another plate before her. This one held what looked like a simple piece of seared fish, skin crackling and golden, accompanied by a smear of something green and a single perfect radish carved into a rose. "Why me?" Iris asked, staring at the plate. Why invite me, specifically? Because you're broken, Damien said simply. And I collect broken things. I find them fascinating, the way they fit back together, often in ways more interesting than the original design. She should have been offended, should have stood up, walked out, written a scathing review about pretentious chefs who played God with their guests' emotions. But instead, she picked up her fork. The fish melted on her tongue, butter and salt and something herbal that made her think of summer gardens and her grandmother's kitchen and every good meal she'd ever forgotten. The green sauce was sharp, almost aggressive, cutting through the richness, and underneath it all, that same dark note from the oyster, like a secret being whispered in a language she didn't quite understand. What is that? She asked, pointing to the sauce with her fork. That taste underneath everything. Damien leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. If I told you, he said, you wouldn't come back. And I very much want you to come back, Iris. The way he said her name, intimate, possessive, should have frightened her. Instead, it sent heat rushing through her body, pooling low in her stomach. I don't understand what's happening, she admitted. You don't have to understand, Damien said, rising to retrieve another dish. You just have to trust me. Can you do that? Every instinct she had screamed no. This man was dangerous. This situation was wrong. Whatever he was doing, whatever he was putting in the food, it couldn't be legal, couldn't be safe. She could taste again. Yes, she heard herself say. I can trust you. His smile widened, and for just a moment, she saw something behind it. Triumph, perhaps, or satisfaction. The look of a hunter who'd just watched his prey walk willingly into the trap. The next course was meat, duck, she thought, though the flavor was unlike any duck she'd ever tasted. It was served nearly raw, the flesh dark and tender, accompanied by cherries that had been cooked down until they were almost black. Sweet and metallic and wrong in the most intoxicating way. As she ate, Damien talked. He told her about the supper club, how he'd started it 3 years ago, invitation only, 12 guests per week maximum. How he sourced ingredients from places most people had never heard of, used techniques that had been forgotten or forbidden. Food should be transformative, he said, watching her eat with an expression that was almost tender. Not just fuel, not just pleasure. It should change you, make you into someone new, someone better, or someone worse, Iris asked, only half joking. Sometimes there's no difference, he replied. Between courses, he asked her questions about her career, her accident, her brother. She found herself telling him things she hadn't told anyone. About the guilt she felt over Marcus's addiction, about the mounting debt from his rehab stays, about the fear that she was enabling him even as she tried to save him. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, Damien said, pouring wine into her glass. It was red, almost black, and it tasted like velvet and smoke. You can only stand by and watch them drown. Or if you're smart, you let go before they pull you under with them. He's my brother, she said, defensive. And what are you to him? Damien asked. A meal ticket, a safety net? Or does he actually see you, Iris? Does he know what you've sacrificed? She didn't answer because they both knew the truth. Dessert arrived. A small sphere of dark chocolate, impossibly smooth, filled with something that burst on her tongue like fireworks. Passion fruit, she thought, but deeper, stranger. It made her think of sex and sin, and all the things she'd denied herself in the name of responsibility. When she finished, Damien stood. Same time next Friday, he said, if you want to continue. Continue what? Iris asked, though she already knew the answer. Your education, he said, moving to the door. Your transformation, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to teach you things, Iris, about food, about pleasure, about what you're really capable of when you stop holding yourself back. He paused in the doorway, looking back at her. One rule, though, you don't tell anyone about this place, not your brother, not your editor, no one. Can you do that? She knew she should say no, knew she should demand answers, insist on transparency, behave like the journalist she was supposed to be. but the taste of his food still lingered on her tongue, and the thought of going back to that grey, tasteless existence made her want to scream. "I'll be here," she said. His smile was victory and damnation all at once. "I know," he said, and closed the door behind him. Iris sat alone in the candle-lit room, her heart pounding, her senses alive for the first time in months. She knew, somewhere deep in her bones, that she'd just made a terrible mistake. She also knew she'd never felt more alive. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the last traces of the woman she used to be. The week that followed felt like living in two different worlds. During the day, Iris existed in the grey reality she'd inhabited for months, writing bland articles about restaurant openings, forcing down meals that tasted like nothing, answering her brother's increasingly desperate texts for money. But at night, she dreamed of Damien's food, the dark, impossible flavours that had awakened something in her she hadn't known was sleeping. She tried researching him, of course. Damien Cross appeared nowhere online, no social media, no interviews, no mentions in trade publications. It was as if he'd been carefully erased from the culinary world, or had never existed in it at all. The building in Tribeca had no business license on file, no permits, nothing that would indicate it was anything other than a private residence. She should have been alarmed. Instead, she felt a thrill of anticipation every time she thought about Friday. Marcus showed up on Wednesday, looking thinner than he had 2 weeks ago. His eyes were bright in the wrong way, pupils dilated, and there were fresh track marks on his arms that he tried to hide with long sleeves. "I need $2,000, he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I got into some trouble with the wrong people. If I don't pay by Friday..." "No," Iris said, the word coming out sharper than she intended. "I gave you $3,000 last month. You said it was for rent." "It was," he lied, not even trying to make it convincing. "This is different. These guys, Iris, they're serious. They'll hurt me." She looked at her brother, 26 years old and already hollowed out by addiction, a ghost wearing the face of the boy who used to make her laugh. When had she stopped being able to save him? When had he stopped being worth saving? The thought shocked her with its cruelty. "I don't have it," she said quietly. "I'm barely making rent myself." "You could if you wanted to," Marcus snapped, his desperation turning to anger the way it always did. "You could write more articles, take more assignments, but you're too proud to admit you're washed up, too proud to do anything except judge me." Each word was a knife, precise and deliberate. She'd taught him where to cut to make it hurt the most. "Get out," she said. "Iris, get out," she screamed, surprising both of them with the force of it. "Get out and don't come back until you're actually ready to get clean. I'm done enabling you. I'm done watching you kill yourself in slow motion." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, his face cycling through emotions too quickly to name. Then he laughed, bitter and broken. "You know what's funny?" he said, heading for the door. "You think you're so much better than me. But we're the same, sis. We're both addicts. I just have the decency to admit what I'm chasing." The door slammed behind him, leaving Iris alone with the echo of his words and the sick certainty that he was right. Friday came like a fever dream. Iris dressed with more care than she had for the first dinner. A deep burgundy dress that clung to her curves, heels that made her legs look endless, hair loose around her shoulders. She told herself it was professional, that she was simply dressing appropriately for an upscale dining experience. She knew she was lying. The brass bell rang hollow in the rain-soaked street. The same elegant woman answered, but this time she smiled. A small, knowing expression that made Iris feel transparent. "Room 7, the woman said. "He's waiting for you." The hallway seemed longer this time, the numbered doors like stations on a journey she couldn't turn back from. She heard different sounds now, a woman's laugh from behind one door, low and intimate, the clink of champagne glasses. Once, she could have sworn she heard someone crying. Damien was already in the room when she arrived, standing by the window with his back to her. He wore black tonight instead of white, and it made him look like a shadow given form. "You came back," he said, without turning around. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Iris asked, closing the door behind her. "I hoped you would," he corrected, finally facing her. His pale eyes traveled over her slowly, appreciatively. "You look different tonight, hungrier." She should have been offended by the way he looked at her, like she was something to be consumed. Instead, she felt heat pool low in her belly. "I had a fight with my brother," she said, not sure why she was telling him. "He needed money. I said no." "Good," Damien said simply. "Sit. Tonight's menu is special." The first course was already waiting, a bowl of soup so dark it was almost black, steam rising from it in lazy spirals. It smelled like mushrooms and earth, and something else she couldn't identify. "What is it?" she asked. "Patience," he said, settling into the chair across from her. Tonight, he didn't just watch her eat. He ate with her, his movements deliberate and sensual. Taste first, questions later. The soup was revelation, rich and complex, with layers of flavor that unfolded on her tongue like a story. First the earthiness of mushrooms, then something floral, then that dark undertone that characterized all of Damien's cooking. It tasted like secrets and shadows, and the space between breaths. "It's incredible," she breathed. "It should be," Damien said. "The main ingredient costs more per ounce than gold, and it's nearly impossible to source legally." Iris paused, spoon halfway to her lips. "Legally?" He smiled. "There are many things in this world that are illegal simply because most people can't handle them responsibly. Certain mushrooms, certain plants, certain experiences. I prefer to think of myself as an educator, helping people access their full potential." "You're putting drugs in the food," Iris said flatly. "I'm putting medicine in the food," Damien corrected. "Compounds that have been used for thousands of years in healing and spiritual practices. Modern medicine is just starting to understand their potential for treating trauma, depression, various forms of neurological damage. Like, for instance, ageusia." She set down her spoon carefully. "You're microdosing me. I'm helping you heal," he said, leaning forward. "Tell me, Iris, in the past week, have you been able to taste anything else? Regular food from restaurants, groceries, anything?" She wanted to lie, but the truth was sitting heavy in her chest. "No," she admitted. "Only here. Only your food. That's because your mind has created a very specific association," Damien explained, his voice taking on a lecturer's tone. "The compounds I use don't just restore neural pathways, they create new ones. You've taught your brain that pleasure, sensation, taste itself exists only here, only with me." It's a kind of imprinting. Horror and fascination warred in her chest. "That's manipulation. That's transformation," he countered. "You came to me broken. I'm making you whole again. The fact that wholeness comes with certain conditions, well, everything worthwhile has a price. She should leave, should run from this place and never look back, should report him to someone, the health department, the police, anyone who would listen. But the soup was still warm in front of her, and she could taste it, and she'd been numb for so damn long. "Why?" she asked instead. "Why go to all this trouble? Why not just open a normal restaurant?" Damien's expression changed, something darker flickering across his features. "I had a normal restaurant once," he said quietly. "In Paris. 3 Michelin stars. Lines around the block. Food critics calling me the next great culinary mind." He paused, swirling wine in his glass. "Then one of those critics died at my table. Allergic reaction, they said. Even though I'd asked specifically about allergies. Even though he'd assured me he had none. But in the world of haute cuisine, someone dies eating your food and you're finished. Doesn't matter whose fault it was." "I'm sorry," Iris said, meaning it. "Don't be," Damien said, his voice hardening. "It taught me something valuable. The system is designed to destroy people who push boundaries, who demand more from their craft than comfortable mediocrity. So I decided to work outside the system entirely, to create experiences that would be impossible in a conventional restaurant." He stood and retrieved the next course. Something that looked like raw meat wrapped around a delicate flour. "This is beef carpaccio," he said, placing it before her. "The cattle are raised on a specific diet that includes herbs known for their psychoactive properties. The flour in the center is datura, beautiful, deadly in the wrong dose, transcendent in the right one. Iris stared at the plate. You're telling me this could kill me? Everything could kill you, Damien said. Cars, peanuts, bad decisions, love. The question is whether the experience is worth the risk. She picked up her fork. The meat was buttery soft, melting on her tongue. The flour added a bitter note that somehow made everything else taste more intense, more alive. She felt a slight tingling in her fingertips, a gentle buzzing at the base of her skull. What did that critic's name? She asked, the words coming out slower than she intended. The one who died. Philippe Mercier, Damien said, watching her carefully. Why do you ask? Just curious, Iris said, though her mind was working through a haze. She knew that name. Philippe Mercier had been famous for his brutal reviews, his ability to destroy careers with a single article. He died 5 years ago in Paris, at a restaurant whose name she couldn't remember. You're wondering if I killed him, Damien said, a statement rather than a question. Did you? Iris asked, meeting his eyes. He smiled slowly. Does it matter? If I said, yes, would you stop eating? Would you walk away from the only thing that makes you feel alive? The terrible thing was, she didn't know the answer. The next course was fish, delicate and precise, with a sauce that tasted like the ocean at midnight. Then came quail, the tiny bird so tender it fell apart at the touch of her fork. Each dish was accompanied by wine that seemed specifically designed to enhance the effects of whatever Damien had hidden in the food, her perceptions sharpening and softening by turns, the candlelight growing brighter, Damien's face becoming the only solid thing in a wavering world. Tell me about your accident, he said during the cheese course. Why? Iris asked, her tongue feeling loose. Because I want to understand what broke you, he said simply. So she told him. About the rain and the red light, and the way the world had tilted sideways. But more than that, she told him about the moment she'd woken up in the hospital and realized she couldn't taste the jello the nurse had brought her. How that small loss had felt like dying. How everything in her life had been built around food. Her career, her identity, her sense of purpose. And suddenly, it was all gone. The doctor said it was psychological, she continued, words flowing easier now. That my brain was protecting me from something. But protecting me from what? The accident wasn't that bad. I walked away. Why would my mind take away the one thing I loved most? Maybe it wasn't protecting you from the accident, Damien said softly. Maybe it was protecting you from yourself, from the life you were living. Sometimes trauma gives us permission to become someone new, someone we were always meant to be. And who am I meant to be? Iris asked, the question hanging between them like smoke. Damien reached across the table and took her hand. His touch was warm, electric, sending shivers up her arm. Someone who understands that morality is just another flavor, he said. That good and evil are as subjective as sweet and sour. Someone who's willing to taste everything life has to offer, even the dark things, especially the dark things. Dessert was a single chocolate truffle, placed on her tongue like communion. It melted slowly, releasing flavors that shouldn't have been possible. Roses and smoke, and something that tasted exactly like the moment before a kiss. Next week, Damien said, I want you to bring someone. Iris blinked, trying to focus through the pleasant haze. I thought you said no one could know about this place. I said you couldn't tell anyone, he corrected. But there are people who could benefit from what I offer. People who are suffering. Broken people like you were, like you still are, in some ways. Understanding dawned slowly. You want me to bring Marcus. Addiction is just another form of lost sensation, Damien said. Your brother is chasing a feeling he can't access any other way. I could help him. Teach him to find that transcendence through elevation rather than degradation. Every instinct Iris had left screamed danger. Whatever Damien was offering, it wasn't help. It was something else entirely. Something that would bind Marcus to this place the way she was already bound. I don't think that's a good idea, she said carefully. Of course you don't, Damien said, releasing her hand and standing. because you still think you can save him the conventional way, rehab and therapy and tough love. How's that working out for you? The words hit like a slap. Think about it, Damien continued, moving to the door. Think about what it would mean to actually help your brother, instead of just watching him destroy himself. I'll be here next Friday, whether you bring him or not. He paused, looking back at her with those pale, unreadable eyes. But Iris, eventually you're going to have to choose between the comfortable lies you've been telling yourself and the uncomfortable truth of what you're becoming. Between saving your brother and saving yourself. You can't do both. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the candles burning low and the taste of chocolate still on her tongue. Iris sat in the silence for a long time, trying to convince herself that she would never bring Marcus here, that she would never be complicit in whatever dark game Damien was playing. But as she stood to leave, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Marcus, unconscious on a dirty floor, needles still in his arm, and underneath, a single line. Found him like this in the bathroom of a club on the Lower East Side. Thought you'd want to know. He's alive, for now. D. Iris stared at the message, her hands shaking. Damien had been watching Marcus, had probably been watching him for weeks, had maybe even orchestrated the fight that had driven her brother away, knowing it would make her desperate enough to consider his offer. She should have been terrified. Instead, she found herself thinking that maybe Damien was right. Maybe conventional salvation was a fantasy. Maybe the only way to save someone was to drag them into the dark with you and teach them how to thrive there. She texted back before she could change her mind. Next Friday, I'll bring him. The response came immediately. Good girl. Iris deleted the messages, erased the evidence of her capitulation, and walked out into the rain. Somewhere between the brass bell and the street, she crossed a line she hadn't even known existed. Behind her, in the building with no name, Damien Cross smiled in the darkness. Another piece moved into place. Another soul bound to his table. The game was just beginning. Convincing Marcus to come to the dinner required lying, which Iris told herself was for his own good. She found him 3 days later at a halfway house in Brooklyn, looking gaunt and defeated, his skin the color of old paper. She told him she'd gotten a freelance assignment, a piece on exclusive dining experiences, and needed a +1. She told him the restaurant would pay for both their meals. She told him it would be good for him to get out, to feel normal again. She did not tell him about the drugs in the food. She did not tell him about Damien's plans. She did not tell him that she was delivering him to a predator disguised as salvation. You sure this is legit? Marcus asked on Friday evening, standing outside the Tribeca townhouse in clothes she'd bought him that afternoon. It doesn't look like a restaurant. It's exclusive, Iris said, her finger hovering over the brass bell. That's the point. Are you going to complain, or are you going to let me buy you the best meal of your life? He managed a weak smile. When you put it that way. The door opened before she could ring, as if they'd been expected. The elegant woman stood there, but tonight her expression was different, assessing Marcus with an intensity that made Iris's stomach clench. Ms. Moreau, the woman said. And Mr. Moreau, I presume. Welcome. Please, follow me. They walked down the familiar hallway, past the numbered doors. Tonight, Iris noticed details she'd missed before. The paintings on the walls were all of the same subject, rendered in different styles. A man with pale eyes, watching, always watching. Is that the chef? Marcus whispered, nodding at one of the portraits. Yes, the woman answered, though the question hadn't been directed at her. Mr. Cross commissioned them over the years. Different artists, different interpretations, but always the same essential truth. Which is? Iris asked. The woman stopped at room 7 and smiled. That some men are meant to consume others. She opened the door and gestured them inside. The room had been transformed. Instead of a table for 2, there was a longer table set for 4. 2 of the places were already occupied. At one end sat a woman in her 40s, beautiful in the way expensive maintenance made possible. Perfect skin, perfect hair, perfect teeth. But her eyes were desperate, hunted. She looked at Iris and Marcus without really seeing them. At the other end sat a young man, barely out of his teens, with the kind of beauty that would fade fast. He was staring at his empty plate with an expression that reminded Iris of religious fervor. "Ah," Damien said, emerging from a door Iris hadn't noticed. He was dressed in black again, but tonight he wore an apron, pristine white, like a doctor's coat. "Our guests of honor have arrived. Please, sit." His eyes met Iris's, and she saw the triumph there. She'd done exactly what he wanted. "Marcus," Damien said, moving to shake her brother's hand, "your sister has told me so much about you. I'm honored to have you at my table." "Thanks for having me," Marcus said, clearly uncomfortable. "This is a pretty intense setup for dinner. I believe in creating experiences, not just meals," Damien replied. "Now let me introduce you to your fellow diners. This is Victoria Ashford." "Ashford as in the hedge fund Ashfords," Marcus interrupted. The woman smiled thinly. "My late husband's family, yes, though I'm afraid my connection to their fortune is becoming increasingly tenuous." "And this is Julian," Damien continued, gesturing to the young man. "A dancer with the New York City Ballet, or he was, before his injury." Julian looked up, and Iris saw his eyes were glassy, pupils blown wide. "I dance again now," he said softly. "When I eat here, I dance in my mind, better than I ever did on stage." The words sent ice down Iris's spine. "We're all broken here," Victoria said, taking a long sip of wine. "That's the point. Damien collects us, fixes us, makes us dependent on him, and we let him because the alternative is going back to being broken. Victoria comes here twice a week," Damien said, unbothered by her words. "She was hospitalized for depression after her husband's death. Tried to kill herself 3 times. Couldn't feel anything, not joy, not sadness, not even the pain she desperately wanted to feel. Now she feels everything. Too much sometimes," Victoria admitted. "But it's better than nothing." Marcus looked at Iris, confusion and concern warring on his face. "What is this place?" "A sanctuary," Damien said, before Iris could answer. "A place where people who've lost themselves can be remade. Your sister understands this. She's been coming here for 3 weeks now. Haven't you noticed the change in her?" Marcus studied his sister's face. "You can taste again," he said slowly. "That's what this is. He's helping you taste again." "Among other things," Damien said, producing the first course with a flourish. Small plates appeared in front of each diner, raw oysters, glistening with that same dark caviar Iris had tasted her first night. "What is that?" Marcus asked, pointing at the black pearls. "Medicine," Damien said simply. "Eat. Trust me." Iris watched her brother hesitate, saw the moment his addict's brain made the calculation. Free high, sanctioned by his sister, dressed up as fine dining. He picked up the oyster shell. "Marcus, wait," Iris started, but Victoria cut her off. "Let him," the older woman said. "You brought him here for this. Don't pretend otherwise." Marcus tilted the oyster into his mouth and swallowed. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then his eyes widened, his whole body going rigid. "What is that?" "That's what it feels like to be alive," Damien said softly. "Really, truly alive. Not chasing oblivion, not running from pain, just experiencing sensation in its purest form." Tears were running down Marcus's face. "I don't understand." "You will," Damien promised, and produced the next course. What followed was a symphony of manipulation. Each dish was carefully calibrated to create specific effects. Euphoria, melancholy, desire, fear. Iris watched her brother cycle through emotions he hadn't felt in years, his face transforming with each course. Watched Julian slip deeper into whatever private hallucination he was experiencing, his hands moving in graceful patterns as if conducting invisible music. Watched Victoria's mask of sophisticated composure crack and reform, like ice over troubled water. And through it all, Damien watched them with the satisfaction of an artist surveying his masterpiece. "You're drugging us," Marcus said during the 4th course, but he didn't stop eating. "I'm treating you," Damien corrected. "Everything I use has medicinal properties. psilocybin for depression and trauma, DMT for spiritual awakening, compounds derived from rare plants that Western medicine hasn't even named yet, all in doses carefully calculated for therapeutic effect. It's illegal, Iris said, though her protest sounded weak even to her own ears. So was alcohol once, Victoria said. So was love between people of the same sex. Legality and morality are rarely aligned. Besides, Damien added, you're all here voluntarily. You can leave anytime you want. The door isn't locked. But it was locked, Iris understood. Not with deadbolts or chains, but with dependency. With the promise of feeling something in a world that had made them numb. How much does this cost? Marcus asked suddenly. Iris can't afford. Tonight is complimentary, Damien interrupted. A gift. If you choose to return, we can discuss arrangements. What kind of arrangements? Iris demanded. Damien smiled. Everyone pays differently. Victoria pays in cash. She has plenty. Julian pays in labor. He helps me source certain ingredients from his connections in the dance world. And you, Iris, pay in words. You're going to write about this place. Her blood ran cold. You said no one could know. I said you couldn't tell anyone, he corrected. But you're going to write a series of articles about underground dining experiences. Carefully crafted pieces that make people curious, without giving away too much. That plant. Seeds. That make certain people, broken people, desperate people, wonder if such a place might exist for them. You're recruiting, Iris said, understanding dawning with sickening clarity. You're using me to find more victims. I'm using you to find more patients, Damien said. People who need what I offer. And in return, you get to keep coming here. You get to keep tasting. You get to keep feeling alive. And me? Marcus asked. What would I pay? Damien turned to him, and his expression was almost gentle. You would pay in honesty, he said. You would tell me about the people you know from your support groups, your rehab stays, other addicts who are suffering, who could benefit from a different approach to recovery. You want me to be your dealer, Marcus said flatly. I want you to be a guide, Damien replied, to help others find the path you're discovering tonight. The main course arrived. Something Iris couldn't identify. Meat that looked almost iridescent in the candlelight. It smelled like copper and flowers, and the moment before a storm breaks. What is this? Julian asked, his first words in nearly an hour. Courage, Damien said. Eat it, and find out what you're truly capable of. They ate, all of them, even knowing what they were doing, even understanding the price. The meat was transcendent, rich and strange and impossible, filling Iris with a reckless energy that made her feel invincible. I have a confession, Victoria said suddenly, her voice loud in the quiet room. My husband didn't die in an accident. I killed him. The words hung in the air like smoke. Victoria, Damien started, but she waved him off. Let me finish, she said. He was cruel, controlling. He made me feel like nothing, so I poisoned him. Slowly, over months, with compounds I bought online. Made it look like a heart attack. No one suspected. She looked around the table, her eyes bright with tears or madness. I thought it would make me feel better, thought I'd feel free, but I just felt empty until I came here. Why are you telling us this? Iris whispered. Because that's what this place does, Victoria said. It makes you honest, makes you face what you really are. And what I am is a murderer who feels more alive eating drugged food than I did killing my husband. Julian laughed, high and strange. I stole from the company, he said. That's why I can't dance anymore, not because of an injury, because they fired me for embezzlement and blacklisted me from every major company. I took money to pay for drugs, ruined my whole life for a feeling. And now I pay for a different feeling with my dignity. Everyone was looking at Marcus now. I've been lying to you, he told Iris, his voice breaking. I sold Mum's jewelry. The pieces she left you, the ones you thought were in the safety deposit box. I took them months ago, got into the box with her old key, sold them to a pawn shop for practically nothing, spent it all in a week. Iris felt the words like physical blows. Her mother's pearls, her grandmother's wedding ring, all of it gone. "I'm sorry," Marcus sobbed. "I'm so sorry." "Your turn, Iris," Damien said softly. "What's your truth?" She looked at him, at his pale eyes reflecting candlelight, at the small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He'd orchestrated this entire scene, the confessions, the shared guilt, the binding of secrets. "I knew," she heard herself say. "I knew what you were doing to us. Knew it was wrong. And I brought my brother here anyway, because I was lonely, because I wanted to share this with someone, because I'd rather damn him than lose this feeling." The silence that followed was absolute. "Beautiful," Damien murmured. "Now you understand. Now you're ready." "Ready for what?" Iris asked. Damien stood and moved to the sideboard, retrieving a final dish. 4 small glasses filled with liquid so dark it seemed to absorb light. "Ready to join the real work," he said, placing a glass before each of them. "Everything up until now has been preparation, opening your minds, freeing you from conventional morality, teaching you to embrace what you truly are. But this," he gestured to the glasses, "this is graduation." "What is it?" Marcus asked. "A compound I've been perfecting for years," Damien said, "derived from a fungus that grows only in one cave system in Peru. The indigenous people call it the truth that devours lies. It creates a permanent change in brain chemistry. Those who drink it become connected, to each other, to me, to the work we're going to do together." "What work?" Victoria demanded. Damien's smile widened. "There are people in this world who deserve to suffer," he said calmly. "People who profit from others' pain, who create the systems that break people like you. I've spent years identifying them, inviting them here, feeding them carefully measured doses of toxins disguised as transcendence." The room seemed to tilt. "You're killing them," Iris said. "I'm administering justice," Damien corrected. "Slowly, painlessly. They come here seeking elevated experiences, and they leave with death growing inside them. It takes months, sometimes years. Looks like natural causes: organ failure, stroke, aggressive cancers. Untraceable." "Philippe Mercier," Iris breathed. "You did kill him." "He was the first," Damien agreed. "A man who destroyed careers for sport, who drove a young chef to suicide with a single review, who sat at my table and mocked everything I'd created. So I gave him what he deserved, and I've been doing it ever since." "You're insane," Marcus said, but his hand was already reaching for the glass. "I'm effective," Damien said, "and you're going to help me, all of you. Victoria, you'll use your society connections to identify targets. Julian, you'll help me cultivate the fungi and plants I need. Marcus, you'll be my connection to the pharmaceutical underworld. And Iris," he looked at her with something almost like love, "you'll document everything. Create the narrative. Make people understand that what we're doing isn't murder, it's revolution. A reckoning for everyone who profits from human suffering." "We could go to the police," Iris said weakly. "You could," Damien agreed. "Victoria could confess to murdering her husband. Julian could explain the embezzlement. Marcus could admit to theft and drug possession. You could all implicate yourselves in weeks of voluntary drug use. And I could disappear. I'm very good at that. This building doesn't exist on any official records. My name isn't real. You destroy yourselves and accomplish nothing." He was right, and they all knew it. "Or," Damien continued, "you can drink. Join me. Be part of something meaningful. Help me rid the world of truly evil people while experiencing heights of consciousness most humans never dream of. You'll never feel empty again. Never feel broken. You'll be transformed." Victoria picked up her glass first. "I'm tired of feeling guilty," she said. "Tired of feeling anything except what you make me feel here." She drank. Julian went next, his hands trembling. "I just want to dance again," he whispered. "Even if it's only in my mind." He drank. Marcus looked at Iris, his eyes pleading for permission or forgiveness, or maybe just understanding. "I've been dying slowly for years," he said. "At least this way it means something." He drank, and then there was only Iris, staring at the dark liquid in her glass. feeling the weight of every choice that had led her to this moment, the accident that stole her taste, the desperation that brought her here, the selfishness that made her bring Marcus into this nightmare. She could refuse, could walk away, could try to salvage some fragment of the person she used to be. But that person was gone, wasn't she? Died in the rain on that October night, 8 months ago. Everything since then had been a ghost pretending to be alive. "What does it taste like?" she asked. Damien smiled. "Like finally coming home." Iris picked up the glass. The liquid was warm, viscous, moving like oil. She could smell it now. Earth and metal, and something sweetly rotten, like fruit left too long in the sun. She thought about her mother's jewelry, sold for drugs, about her career, built on a sense she no longer possessed, about her brother, already lost to this place, about the woman she'd been and the woman she was becoming. She drank. The taste was indescribable. Every flavor she'd ever known compressed into a single moment, then exploding outward into dimensions she hadn't known existed. Sweet and bitter and umami and something beyond language, beyond category. It burned going down, then spread through her body like liquid fire. And then she felt it. A connection, thin as spider silk but growing stronger. To Marcus beside her, to Victoria and Julian across the table, to Damien, watching them all with proprietary satisfaction. She could feel their emotions bleeding into hers, their thoughts, brushing against her consciousness like moths against glass. "What have you done to us?" she whispered. "Made you into something new," Damien said, taking her hand. His touch sent electricity through her entire body. "Made you mine. Welcome to the family, Iris. Welcome home. And despite everything, despite the horror, despite the moral abyss she'd just thrown herself into, despite knowing she'd just become complicit in murder, she felt herself smile. Because for the first time in 8 months, she felt whole. The candles burned low around them as Damien explained what would come next. The targets they would identify together. The careful poisonings disguised as transcendent dining experiences. The revolution they would build, one death at a time. Iris listened, holding her brother's hand, feeling the chemical bond that now tied them all together. She knew she should feel horrified, knew she should feel guilt, shame, self-loathing. But all she felt was hunger. Hunger for the next meal, the next target, the next transformation. She was broken, and Damien had reforged her into something darker and more dangerous than she'd ever imagined she could be. And who could help her? She liked what she'd become. The first target was Victoria's idea. 3 weeks after they'd all drunk from Damien's dark communion, the 5 of them sat in a private room above the dining area. A space Iris hadn't known existed. It looked like a war room dressed as a library, with leather chairs and mahogany shelves lined with books on toxicology, botany, neurochemistry. A large table dominated the center, covered with photographs and files. "His name is Richard Castellano," Victoria said, sliding a photo across the table. A man in his 50s, handsome in a predatory way, with silver hair and cold eyes. He runs a network of sober living facilities, charges desperate families $30,000 a month, then cuts costs by hiring unqualified staff and serving inadequate food. 6 people have died in his facilities in the past 2 years. Preventable deaths. He's made millions off human suffering. Marcus leaned forward, his face hard. "I know someone who was at one of his places," he said quietly. "Trevor, good guy, trying so hard to get clean. He died of sepsis from an infected wound that no one treated for 3 days. They said he was faking for attention. The bond Damien had created allowed them to feel Marcus's rage, his grief. It flowed through all of them like current through water. He's perfect," Damien said, examining the file. "Wealthy enough to afford my prices, arrogant enough to accept an exclusive invitation, and absolutely deserving of what we're going to give him." Iris had spent the past 3 weeks trying to reconcile what she was becoming. She'd written the articles Damien requested, carefully crafted pieces about the underground dining scene, dropping hints about exclusive experiences for those brave enough to seek them out. 3 new people had been vetted and invited based on her words. 3 more broken souls for Damien to collect. She should have felt guilty, should have been horrified by her complicity. Instead, she felt purposeful for the first time in years. "How do we get him here?" Julian asked. He looked healthier now, filling out, color returning to his cheeks. Damien's drugs had given him something methadone never could. Not just relief, but meaning. "I'll handle the invitation," Victoria said. "We run in the same circles. I'll mention an exclusive dining experience. Drop your name, Damien." Men like Richard can't resist the opportunity to access something exclusive, something other wealthy people are talking about. "And the compound?" Marcus asked. "What are we giving him?" Damien smiled, opening a locked cabinet behind him. Inside were dozens of glass vials, each labeled in precise handwriting. He selected one filled with amber liquid. "This is derived from the castor bean," he explained, holding it up to the light. "Ricin, but modified. I've spent years perfecting the formula. It works slower, mimics other conditions, remains undetectable in standard toxicology screens. Delivered in small doses over several meals, it causes progressive organ failure that looks exactly like natural disease. He'll be dead in 6 months, maybe less, and no one will ever know why." The casual way he discussed murder should have chilled Iris to her core. Instead, she found herself taking notes. "We need to be careful," she said, her journalist instincts kicking in despite everything. "If too many people connected to you start dying, eventually someone will notice a pattern." "Which is why we're selective," Damien replied. "One target every few months. Different methods, different timelines. And we always choose people whose deaths will be blamed on their lifestyle. Stress, excess, poor health choices. Richard drinks heavily. When his liver fails, everyone will assume it was the alcohol." "What about the others?" Julian asked. "The new people you're bringing in. Do they know what we're doing?" "Not yet," Damien said. "They're still in the opening phase, learning to trust, learning to need. Eventually they'll graduate, like you did. They'll drink the binding compound and join our family. Some will help us identify targets. Others will help with logistics. Everyone has a role to play." "It's a cult," Iris said, not quite a question. "It's a community," Damien corrected gently, "bound by shared purpose and elevated consciousness." "Is that so different from any other organization?" "Corporations bond their employees with stock options and health insurance. We bond our family with chemistry and truth." He reached out and took Iris's hand, and she felt that electric connection pulse between them. "You're still fighting it," he said softly. "Still trying to hold on to the person you used to be. But she's gone, Iris. The woman who believed in conventional morality, who thought the system could be fixed from within. She died when you drank from my cup. Now you're something better. Something evolved." The terrible thing was, part of her believed him. Richard Castellano accepted the invitation within 24 hours. Victoria had worked her magic, making it sound exclusive enough to appeal to his ego, mysterious enough to intrigue him. Damien scheduled him for a Thursday night, alone, in room 3. "I want you there," Damien told Iris the night before. "Hidden, watching. I want you to see what we do, to understand the full scope of our work." So she found herself concealed behind a two-way mirror, Marcus beside her, both of them silent witnesses to Richard Castellano's Last Supper. He was exactly as Victoria described, arrogant, entitled, the kind of man who believed the world existed to serve him. He barely thanked Damien for the food, treating the experience like something owed rather than offered. "This is adequate," Richard said after the 3rd course, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. "Though I've had better in Paris. The molecular gastronomy trend is rather passé, don't you think?" Damien smiled, unbothered. "Perhaps you'd prefer something more traditional," he said, producing the next dish. It was beautiful. A perfectly seared piece of fish with golden skin, accompanied by vegetables that looked like edible jewels. And infused throughout, invisible and tasteless, was enough modified ricin to begin the slow destruction of Richard's internal organs. Iris watched him eat, complaining between bites about the restaurant scene, about his businesses, about the ingratitude of the addicts he helped. Watched Damien serve him course after poisoned course, his expression serene, almost beatific. "How do you feel?" Marcus whispered beside her. Iris searched her conscience for horror, for the moral revulsion she knew she should be experiencing. Found instead a cold satisfaction. This man had profited from suffering, had let people die through negligence and greed, and now he would face consequences the law would never give him. "I feel nothing," she admitted. "Is that wrong?" "I don't know anymore," Marcus said. "I don't think I care." By the end of the meal, Richard had consumed enough poison to seal his fate. He left satisfied, promising to return, already planning to tell his wealthy friends about this exclusive discovery. He had no idea he'd just signed his own death warrant. "How long?" Iris asked afterward, when they'd all gathered in the upper room. 4 to 6 months, Damien said. "He'll start feeling fatigued in a few weeks. Then comes nausea, digestive issues. His doctors will run tests, find evidence of liver and kidney damage. They'll blame his drinking, his diet, his stress levels. By the time they realize how serious it is, it'll be too late, and he'll never connect it back to one meal at a restaurant no one can prove exists." "He'll come back," Victoria said with certainty. "Men like him always come back. They can't resist." She was right. Richard returned 2 weeks later, bringing a colleague, another man in the same industry, equally complicit in profiting from addiction. Damien served them both, smiling his enigmatic smile, adding his poison drop by careful drop. The weeks blurred together after that. More targets, more poisonings, more articles from Iris that brought in new recruits. The family grew. 10 people, then 15, then 20. All of them broken in different ways. All of them bound by Damien's compound and their shared complicity. Iris stopped questioning her role, stopped feeling the ghost of guilt that had haunted her those first weeks. She wrote her articles, attended the dinners, helped identify targets through her media connections. She watched people die slowly, their deaths announced in obituaries she sometimes wrote herself, spinning their demise into tragic tales of excess and misfortune. She was good at it, better than she'd been at legitimate journalism. Marcus flourished too, in his own dark way. He'd stopped using traditional drugs entirely, didn't need them when Damien's compounds offered something so much more refined. He'd become Damien's right hand in sourcing ingredients, using his connections from years of addiction to access rare plants and chemicals. The brother she'd tried so hard to save was gone, replaced by someone efficient and cold and utterly devoted to their cause. 3 months after Richard's first meal, news broke that he'd died of acute liver failure. The obituaries called it a tragedy, blamed his lifestyle, mourned the loss of a successful entrepreneur. No one mentioned the people who died in his facilities. No one connected his death to a single Thursday dinner at a restaurant that didn't exist. They celebrated that night. All 23 members of Damien's family gathered in the dining room for a feast. The meal was transcendent, everything Damien had taught them to crave, elevated to an art form. "To justice," Damien said, raising his glass, "and to all of you, my beautiful instruments of change." They drank, and Iris felt the bond pulse through all of them, a web of chemical and emotional connection that made them less like individuals and more like cells in a single organism. Damien's organism. She looked around the table at faces she'd come to know. Victoria, who smiled more easily now. Julian, who'd started choreographing invisible dances between courses. Marcus, who'd finally stopped looking haunted. And a dozen others, all of them transformed, all of them complicit, all of them free. "What's next?" someone asked. Damien's smile was radiant. "Everything," he said. "We've proven the concept. Now we expand. More locations, more families, a network of invisible justice spreading through every major city. We'll be everywhere and nowhere, untouchable, perfect." Later that night, after the others had left, Iris found herself alone with Damien in the upper room. He was cataloguing his compounds, making notes in his precise handwriting. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "What we're doing?" He looked up, those pale eyes finding hers. "Do you?" He countered. She considered the question honestly, thought about the woman she'd been, Naive, powerless, clinging to conventional morality while the world ground people into dust. Thought about the woman she'd become, clear-eyed, purposeful, finally able to taste again because Damien had taught her that some flavors required darkness to appreciate. "No," she said. "I don't regret it at all." Damien smiled and pulled her close, his kiss tasting of wine and something darker, something she'd learned to crave. "Good," he murmured against her lips, "because we're just getting started." And in that moment, wrapped in his arms, bound to him by chemistry and choice, Iris Moreau finally understood what it meant to be whole, even if wholeness came at the price of her humanity. The truth came 6 months later, delivered in the form of blood tests Iris hadn't wanted to take. She'd been feeling off for weeks. Fatigue that went beyond normal tiredness. Nausea that came in waves. A persistent ache in her abdomen she couldn't ignore. She told herself it was stress, the toll of living a double life. But when she started losing weight despite eating regularly, Marcus insisted she see a doctor. The results came back on a Tuesday, stark and undeniable. Elevated liver enzymes, kidney damage, signs of systemic poisoning. Her doctor, a kind woman in her 50s, looked at her with concern. "Have you been exposed to any toxins, industrial chemicals, anything unusual in your environment?" Iris sat frozen, the paper trembling in her hands. The numbers looked exactly like Richard Castellano's had, exactly like the progression Damien had described so carefully. "No," she lied, "nothing I can think of." She left the office in a daze, her mind racing through possibilities she didn't want to consider. It had to be a mistake, or a coincidence, or something environmental. But deep down, in the place where truth lives, she already knew. She went directly to the townhouse, bypassing the brass bell and using the key Damien had given her months ago. The building was quiet. No dinners scheduled tonight. She found him in the upper room, as she knew she would, surrounded by his vials and notebooks. "Iris," he said, looking up with a smile that died when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" She threw the blood work results on the table between them. "Tell me this is a mistake." Damien picked up the papers, his expression carefully neutral as he read. When he looked up, there was something in his eyes. Not surprise, but resignation. "I wish I could," he said softly. The room tilted. "You've been poisoning me," Iris said, her voice hollow. "All of us. Not just the targets. Everyone." "Not poisoning," Damien corrected gently. "Transforming. It's a necessary part of the process. The binding compound, the one that connects you all, it has to be maintained, reinforced with every meal. Yes, it causes some physiological damage, but it also gives you everything you've craved: purpose, connection, the ability to taste again." "You're killing us," Iris said, her legs suddenly unsteady. She sank into a chair. "We're not your family. We're your victims." "You're both," Damien said, moving around the table to kneel before her. "Don't you see? That's the beauty of it. You came to me broken, and I gave you meaning. Yes, that meaning comes with a price. But isn't it worth it? 6 months of truly living versus decades of empty existence." "6 months," Iris repeated, the words barely a whisper. "Perhaps a year," Damien said. "It varies by person. Victoria has been with me longest. 14 months now. She's declining, but she's had more authentic experiences in that time than most people have in their entire lives." Iris's mind flashed to Victoria, who'd been looking more fragile lately, to Julian, whose beautiful face had grown gaunt despite his smile, to Marcus, who complained of headaches but dismissed them as nothing. "My brother," she said. "You're killing my brother." "Your brother was killing himself long before he met me," Damien said. "At least this way, his death will mean something. He's part of something larger. He's helped deliver justice. That's more than he ever accomplished with his addiction." Iris wanted to hit him, to scream, to run, but her body felt heavy, weighted down by months of accumulated poison and the horrifying realization of what she'd become. "Why?" she asked. "Why do this at all?" For the first time since she'd known him, Damien's mask cracked. Something raw and wounded showed through. "Because I'm dying too," he said quietly. "Have been for years. The compounds I create, the ones I use to transform people, I have to test them on myself first. I've been poisoning myself longer than anyone, 2 years, maybe less. And I decided that if I'm going to die, I'm going to take as many deserving people with me as possible and surround myself with people who understand what it means to burn brightly before burning out. You're insane, Iris breathed. I'm honest, he countered. I told you from the beginning that transformation comes with a price. You just didn't want to know what that price was. He was right, and that was the most horrible part. She'd suspected something was wrong for months, had ignored the signs, had chosen not to ask the questions that mattered because she didn't want to lose what he'd given her. The others, she said, do they know? Some have figured it out, Damien admitted. Victoria knows, Julian suspects. The newer ones are still in denial like you were. But eventually, they all come to understand the bargain they've made. And they stay, Iris said, realization washing over her like cold water. They know they're dying, and they keep coming back. Where else would they go? Damien asked. Back to their empty lives? Back to being broken and alone? Here they have purpose, they have family, they have transcendence. Even if it's temporary, it's real. More real than anything else they've ever experienced. Iris stood on shaking legs. I have to tell Marcus. Warn him. He already knows, Damien said. I told him last week. He chose to stay. The words hit like a physical blow. You're lying. Ask him yourself, Damien said, checking his watch. He'll be here in an hour for tonight's family dinner. We're celebrating Julian's last meal. He's in the final stages now, another few weeks at most. He wanted to go out dancing, metaphorically speaking. Iris felt bile rise in her throat. This is murder. Mass murder. This is salvation, Damien replied. I take people who are already dying inside and give them a reason to live, even if that life is brief. And yes, along the way, we remove some truly terrible people from the world. Isn't that worth something? No, Iris said, backing toward the door. No, it's not. None of this is worth it. But even as she said it, she felt the pull. The bond Damien had created calling her back. The promise of tonight's meal already making her mouth water. The knowledge that without his food, she'd go back to tasting nothing, feeling nothing, being nothing. You'll come back, Damien said with quiet certainty. They always do, because I'm the only thing standing between you and the void. Iris ran, out of the upper room, down the hallway, past the numbered doors that had witnessed so much death disguised as transcendence. Out into the street where the October air felt wrong in her lungs, too clean, too empty. She made it 3 blocks before she had to stop, doubled over, vomiting into a trash can. Not from the poison, though that was there, working its slow destruction, but from the realization of what she'd lost. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. Where are you? Dinner's starting soon. Damien said you might not come, but I told him you would. You always do. Her fingers trembled as she typed back. Did you know? About what he's doing to us? The response came immediately. Yes, for a while now. It doesn't matter, Iris. I was dead anyway, just taking longer about it. At least this way I'm part of something. Please come. I don't want to do this. Without you. Iris sank to the ground, her back against a cold brick wall. Around her, the city moved in its familiar rhythms. People heading home from work, couples going to dinner, lives continuing in blessed ignorance of the horror unfolding in a townhouse they'd never notice. She could go to the police, tell them everything. But what could she prove? The building had no official records. Damien's name was an alias. The victims had died of seemingly natural causes months after eating there, and she was complicit in multiple murders, bound to the other family members by chemical and legal chains she couldn't escape. She could run, disappear, try to find a doctor who could treat the poison ravaging her system. But where would she go? Back to an apartment that felt empty, to a career she'd corrupted, to a life of tasteless meals and purposeless days. Or she could go back, sit at Damien's table one more time, taste the impossible flavors he'd taught her to crave, spend her remaining months, weeks, days, feeling something instead of nothing. Her phone buzzed again. A photo from the group chat. The family assembled around the table, Marcus's face visible among them, smiling with genuine happiness for the first time in years. Victoria, elegant even in her decline. Julian, serene in his acceptance. A dozen others, all of them dying, all of them choosing this. "Your seat is waiting," the message said, from Damien. Iris stood slowly, her decision already made, though she hated herself for it. She walked back toward the townhouse, each step feeling like descent and ascension all at once. The brass bell gleamed in the streetlight. She didn't ring it, just used her key, walking through the door like coming home to a house on fire. They were waiting for her in the main dining room, all of them, and when she entered, they smiled. Not victims anymore, not even accomplices, just a family bound by poison and choice, and the terrible knowledge that sometimes damnation feels like grace. "I knew you'd come," Damien said, pulling out her chair. "How long do I have?" Iris asked as she sat. "Does it matter?" he replied, placing the first course before her. It should have mattered. Everything about this should have mattered more than it did. But as the familiar flavors flooded her mouth, transcendent and terrible and exactly what she'd been craving, Iris understood the final truth. She wasn't Damien's victim. She was his masterpiece. They all were. He'd taken broken people and taught them that the only way to feel whole was to consume poison and call it medicine, to choose death over numbness, to become complicit in their own destruction and somehow find meaning in it. And the most horrifying part, as she ate her poisoned meal surrounded by her dying family, Iris realized she wouldn't change a thing. She'd rather burn out than fade away, rather die tasting everything than live tasting nothing, rather be Damien's monster than the world's ghost. Marcus squeezed her hand. Across the table, his grip already weakening, and she squeezed back. They'd found their salvation in damnation, their family in a suicide cult dressed as fine dining, their purpose in delivering death while dying themselves. "To us," Damien said, raising his glass. "To transformation, to the beautiful, terrible things we've become." They drank, all of them, knowing exactly what they were drinking, knowing exactly what it would cost. And as the poison worked its way through her system, as the flavors exploded across her resurrected palate, Iris finally understood the dark gift Damien had given her. He hadn't restored her ability to taste. He'd taught her that the sweetest flavors always hide the deadliest poison, that transcendence and destruction are often the same thing, that the most seductive meals are the ones that kill you. In 6 months, maybe less, she'd be dead. They all would. But tonight, in this moment, surrounded by her poisoned family, eating food that was slowly destroying her from the inside out, tonight, she felt more alive than she ever had. And when her obituary was written, when someone tried to make sense of how a promising food critic died so young, they'd never know the truth. That she hadn't died from organ failure. She'd died from hunger, from craving something so desperately that she'd consumed her own destruction and called it love. The most dangerous addictions she'd learned were the ones that felt like salvation. And Damien Cross, watching his family consume their poison with grateful smiles, had built an empire on that simple truth.